We're only present about half the time. 47% of the time, our minds are wandering. And only 2% have some sort of tools to enhance personal productivity. How can you truly listen to your employee coming to you with a business problem or challenge? I guess I could call myself an entrepreneur. I started a company called Norda Industries back in 2007, manufacturing snacks, potato crisps and corn chips and things like that. I think most of you are familiar with them and with me. And I've had the pleasure of being with many of you before. I'll talk about branding and things like that. But one thing that happened, this was in 2007, the factory burned down. Yeah, and I don't know if I talked to you since then as a group. And I get a call in the middle of the night and I go there and the factory's burning down. Literally watch it burn for 8 hours because our products are very highly flammable, as is the packaging material. So everything, lock, stock and barrel, means machinery, raw materials, finished goods, razed to the ground. And luckily no one was hurt. And you know, as I was watching it burn, like the flames and the whole building burned down and everything, you know what was going through my head? One, it was very humbling to see something you've built up over 10 years be destroyed in a few hours. And two, it was like, is this what I want to be doing for the rest of my life? Yeah, like now this factory's burned down, I have to start all over again. In a way. Now, it's an existential question. Do I want to do this for the rest of my life? And the answer was actually, no. I don't want to be running this business in this form, being a CEO, running this business for the rest of my life or for the next 10 years, or whatever. And so a few weeks later, I actually made that decision. I said, I'm going to leave Norda, the day-to-day running of Norda, in a year's time. I'm going to rebuild it because too much went into it and I want to see it thrive and succeed. We're going to rebuild it. It means so much bigger than us now. The distributors, the farmers, this whole ecosystem. We're going to rebuild this, but I'm not going to be the one running it for the next X number of years. And that's exactly what I did. I needed some help. I had a friend in London who told me, you have to leave. You have to physically leave Kenya, otherwise you're not going to leave the company. And we went to Italy and drank rosé for a week. And then I was like, okay. Anyway, so that's what happened. And then I kind of twiddled my thumbs thinking, what do? I don't really know what I want to do next. But I was always passionate about mindfulness. Mindfulness being just living in the present moment. And I saw it from a kind of spiritual perspective. I didn't think it could be applied to business. I thought, no, you're present when you go home and you meditate and whatever, but not at home with your family, not in the business. You need to get things done. You need results. There's no such thing as, we need to live in the future. What is this present business, So I didn't see exactly how to align it. But after some months, I realized that this was integral for the mental health of employees and the business leader themselves, for their vision, for living with authenticity, for defining their values, for seeing clearly. I realized that mindfulness was a superpower. Okay, and then I embarked upon this mission of how to bring it to business leaders. This is a Harvard study that was done by Killingsworth, okay? At the same time, they found that we're only present like we just did with that exercise. We're only present about half the time. 47% of the time, our minds are wandering, thinking about the past or the future. 70% of leaders say it's difficult for them to be attentive in meetings. Leaders, 70% of leaders who are polled say they find it hard to pay attention in meetings. And only 2% have some sort of tools or practices that they use on a regular basis to enhance personal productivity, to basically train their attention, or to come back to the present moment. So what does that mean? That means we're on autopilot. Autopilot, I used to drive to work on autopilot. And I'd get to the office and I'd wonder how I got there. Which route did I take? Which lane? Which I don't remember. Did I take Bagathi or did I take... Like, you know, sometimes in the shower, when I was working at Norda, I would have my first 3 meetings in the shower. No, not literally. I didn't have those meetings in my shower. My shower wasn't big enough for that. But literally, I would play the first 3 meetings in my head. He would say this, she would say that, and then I'll get upset. And then this is my response. This is how I'm going to show them. And I'd have all this dialogue. But would I feel the warm water on my skin? Would I feel the lather of the soap? No, right? That's what autopilot is. So there's some traits of autopilot. It means your attention is in the past or the future. You're distracted. You're less aware, and you act based on habit patterns and assumptions. I like to call this a been there, done that attitude. So much of our life, we're like, if we feel it's mundane because we're like, I've been there, done that. I know what this is about. I know what this route is like. I know what this person's going to say. Happens at home too. We think we know our partner or our spouse. I know them. But do you really know them? You're acting based on these past habit patterns and assumptions. And autopilot's fine. Look, you can't do everything fully present. It's difficult. Certain things you might want to put on autopilot, like brushing your teeth. Sometimes. I mean, you should be present sometimes. But, you know, there's certain things you want to put on autopilot, that's fine. But how can you truly savor a meal when you're on autopilot? How can you truly listen to your kid when he comes home from school and wants to tell you about his or her day? Or your employee, your subordinate, you're coming to you with a business problem or challenge, or just wanting to come up with a brilliant idea. Are you truly there? Are you truly listening? So that's the disadvantage of being on autopilot. So there's been an explosion in research around mindfulness. This is called PubMed. It's a publications journal where articles are published. And if you see in the last few years, I think this is up to pre-COVID, you can see an explosion in the number of articles around mindfulness. Okay? And most of these articles are centered around something called neuroplasticity. Yeah, neuroplasticity is the notion that the structure and function of our brains changes depending on what we pay attention to, what we focus on. So new neural pathways are forming all the time, depending on what we pay attention to. So that really helps us to think about a growth mindset. Yeah, because it's not just for babies whose brains are changing or people whose brains are injured. All of us, our brains are constantly changing. That's why they say it's good to learn a language or a new instrument, or, you know, or just like London taxi drivers have really advanced brains because they had to learn all those roads by heart, you know? So neuroplasticity. So there was a study done around mind wandering, okay? What they did is they took novice meditators, people who just started out meditating, and they took expert meditators who had done thousands of hours of meditation, and they put them through fMRI machines. These are like brain scanners. Okay, and they wanted to see what happens, what regions of the brain get activated at different times, and which ones kind of get deactivated at certain times. Okay, and what they found, interestingly, is we have something called a default mode network. So remember that autopilot state we're talking about? When your mind is wandering, ruminating about the past or fantasizing about the future, which most of our brains are most of the time, we are in this default mode network. Okay, but what they found with these meditators is that with meditation practice, their default mode network was less active. Yeah, so they were not in that rumination state so much. And the areas of the brain that focus on attention management, the prefrontal cortex, the more evolved part of our brain, was more active amongst these expert meditators, right? Another study around pain. There's a guy called Antoine Lutz, okay, who did a study around pain. I wonder how they come up with these studies sometimes. Honestly, this was like, there was like a heat emitting thermode that kind of zapped you. Okay, so he'd go around zapping people, again, with these novice meditators and these expert meditators, and he'd look at what's happening in their brain when he was zapping them. Okay, and what they found is with the expert meditators, they actually had much less anticipatory anxiety or anticipatory stress. I'll give you an example. You know when you had to do exams and you'd stress out about it for like a month beforehand? It wasn't so much the stress of writing the exam, it was the stress before, or when you have to give a big presentation to a client and you really want that business, you really need that business, and you're stressing about it. It's that anticipatory anxiety and stress. So these expert meditators had less of that anticipatory stress and less self-reported unpleasantness after the zapping. Okay? So the pain didn't last. Pain was there was a little bit of stress associated with the pain, but they didn't have this preamble to it, and they didn't have this, they just let go of it much quicker. Empathy is not, by the way, it's not psychologizing, and it's not agreeing with the other person. I used to think this. I was a people pleaser. I used to think that when you empathize with people, you agree with them. No, it's not agreeing with them. You are able to put yourself in their shoes, understand their perspective, while maintaining a clear discernment of what your own is. And how powerful is that as entrepreneurs, as business leaders, when we can understand our teams from wherever they're sitting, right? So this is important because we can't do anything alone as entrepreneurs. We need teams, we need people. We've learned that early on. And so it's so important for us to understand how to build good, productive, high-performing teams. So Google wanted to know what makes a highly performing team. They wanted to understand why do some teams perform better than other teams. And they embarked on something called Project Aristotle. Okay, and they studied hundreds of teams across different departments, across different countries, and they wanted to understand what the indicators were. Yeah, what the leading indicators of what would make a team successful. So actually, they thought when they started out that it was really going to be things like diversity, introverts versus extroverts, having a good mix of engineers versus, creative types, left brainers, right brainers. And actually, it wasn't really about that. The number one indicator of what would make a team successful is something called psychological safety. That means if I have psychological safety when I'm on a team, I feel like I can be vulnerable. I feel like I can share my ideas, or I can tell people when I'm feeling unhappy or uncomfortable. Speak up, basically, who I am without fear of being judged or reprimanded or put down. Okay? And empathy is a huge part of building that psychological safety. If you want to build a team where people feel safe, because trust is at the forefront, where people feel safe, then you need empathy to do that. Yeah? Ideally, everybody on the team needs a good degree of empathy. It's not to say the other factors, the second, third, fourth, fifth, dependability was important, structure, clarity was important, meaning, impact. These are all very important things. Technical skills, hugely important. But look, psychological safety was number one. Yeah? So it's just to tell you as entrepreneurs, maybe you should be, and I'm sure you are, but maybe you should be focusing here as well.